Metroid games are known for many things, and one of them, certainly amongst its fans, are its boss fights. From the extremely frustrating to some of the best of all time, Metroid has some truly great bosses. But which final boss, the capstone of every game, is the best in the 2D series? So join me today as we explore every final boss in 2D Metroid, ranked. Coming in at last place, we have the Ridley Robot. This is probably a controversial choice, but let's start with the positives. I like that this boss is set up, with a short cutscene of a mysterious robotic eye watching Samus as she enters the pirate ship at the end of the game. And I really enjoy the lore that Ridley was midway through constructing this weapon of terror in his own image. It gives Ridley a rare bit of in-game characterization. However, where the robot falls apart is the actual feel in the game. Coming after the very emotionally satisfying Ruin Test boss, the robot doesn't really feel like a satisfying boss. It sort of feels like it just comes out of nowhere in some ways. Coupled with the fact that it's an extremely basic boss, attacking a fully kitted out Samus with a couple of basic, easily dodged attacks that you can either just dodge or tank through, and you burst this boss down in a flurry of super missiles, making it by far the easiest boss on the list and the most disappointing to me. Coming in at number 7, we have the final boss of the original Metroid 2, the Queen Metroid. Like the Ridley Robot, this boss fight sees the player pinned with their backs against the wall. However, this fight actually makes sense in the context of the game. This is the Metroid species' final stand against their exterminator, and it has the weight of an endgame boss. This fight itself sees Samus firing missiles into the beast's mouth and dodging its projectile attacks. When possible, and optionally, the player can enter the Queen Metroid's stomach to bomb it from within. It's a simple fight, but I certainly enjoy the optional damage option, and the arena even comes with an escape route should the player feel like beating a hasty retreat. A strong boss held back by even better bosses ahead. At the number 6 position, we have the series' very first final boss, Mother Brain from the NES original. This game is the satisfying conclusion to a game that already asks more of the player than most other Metroid games. Or in my opinion, this boss fight is sort of like an endurance test, as Mother Brain challenges the player to be able to manage the orb she fires at the player and their position, all whilst trying to get damage off. It is a shockingly complex boss fight despite being the first in the series, as where Samus is standing in the boss arena matters, lest you end up falling into the lava right in front of Mother Brain and have very little chance of escaping. Of course, your destruction leads to the now iconic self-destruct sequence initiating, which is the cherry on top of a very great boss. While the boss is obviously held back by the jank of the original game, it is a testament to how good this series is when we have 5 more bosses that surpass its original. Coming from Metroid 2 Remake, we have Proteus Ridley. Make no mistake, the gap between this boss and all the bosses below it are enormous, as we're getting into the bosses with good controls and good mechanics, and Proteus Ridley takes advantage to the maximum. The boss takes place on both the ground and sky, which tasks Samus with being able to deal with the Draconic Menace's myriad of attacks in various ways. With the boss fight being so long and Ridley being so tanky, the player cannot afford to make too many mistakes as Ridley hits like a truck. Of course, how can I forget the mid-battle cutscenes, such as when Ridley has Samus pinned down at his mercy, only to be thwarted by the infant Metroid. Karmic repayment for Samus opting to spare the creature. Mechanically, it's an excellent boss. However, I do hold it back here because whilst I love how it ties back into the Prime games, I think it ruins the solemn, introspective feeling the original game went for, and I also feel the boss is simply too tanky for its own good, and lasts considerably longer than most other bosses on this list. Just missing out on our top 3, we have Mother Brain once again, but from Super Metroid. This boss is in a way completely opposite of Proteus Ridley. Mother Brain is actually easier to fight in the original, and both of its first and second phases go relatively quickly. However, where it really shines is as a story boss fight, as Mother Brain is the rare villain in the series to actually defeat Samus and have her at her mercy. However, just before she can deal the finishing blow, the titular Super Metroid comes to save the day, draining Mother Brain of her abilities before turning and giving that energy to Samus herself, saving her life. And with its tragic sacrifice at the hand of Mother Brain, we get perhaps the most cathartic moment in the series, where we absolutely obliterate Mother Brain in a matter of moments, the beast's head being knocked back by the power of every blast, before Mother Brain finally falls and crumbles into dust before us, followed by the best escape sequence in the series. It isn't a complex boss fight or even a hard boss fight, but it is one of the best cutscene boss fights in gaming, and its iconic status is well earned. This is my first time including AM2R on a list like this, but given I and many hold it to be just as good as any other official title, the Queen Metroid from this game cracks the top 3. This boss fight is just so damn good, and it's all in the little details. The Queen Metroid of AM2R is the most cinematic boss fight on the list, with the monster slowly pushing Samus back more and more as it blows up wall after wall with giant fireballs. And how can we forget that as Samus damages the Queen, its mouth shows more and more battle damage, losing teeth and dripping with oozing green blood. AM2R's Queen Metroid, and having the boss slowly push the player back, while having a fair level of difficulty and sensical moves, renders it far better than any other version of the fight. Far better than the comparatively clunky and static version of the original game, and way better than the frankly absurd moveset of its Metroid 2 remake counterpart. The Queen Metroid more than meets the Metroid's fearsome reputation. Coming in for our silver medal, we have the strange pairing of the SAX and the Omega Metroid. Now, unlike every boss in 2D Metroid, this boss acts something akin to the final boss of Elden Ring. If you die to the second boss, you have to start back at the first. Therefore, we'll pair the two together. The SAX easily makes it the better part of the duo, representing the dramatic conclusion between an entity that has hunted and harassed you throughout your adventure and yourself, putting to the test all the powers and abilities Samus has collected through her adventure. And frankly, it's an exhilarating fight, as the SAX in a normal fight doesn't go down easily. She still has the capability to kill Samus and has more HP, as you'll find out if you try to screw attack into it. Phase 2 sees Samus trying to run for her ship, only to be confronted by the Omega Metroid. And in a moment of altruism or opportunism, the SAX tries and fails to stop the massive Metroid, leading it to have no other choice but to fuse with Samus in order to take it down. The Omega Metroid is a far simpler fight, merely lumbering towards Samus, dealing massive damage if it lands a hit, all whilst the self-destruct timer ticks down, adding an extra layer of pressure, knowing that if you fail, you'll have to go right back to the SAX again. Unlike Proteus Ridley, which was great mechanically but bad story-wise, or Mother Brain, which was great story-wise but not so great mechanically, this boss, the SAX and the Omega Metroid, are solid on both fronts, representing Samus finally overcoming both of the horrors that Planet SR388 produced. You all knew what was number 1. Of course, it is the final boss of Metroid Dread. It's Ravenbeak. Ravenbeak, in my opinion, is such a good boss fight that the only other boss fight in all of 2D Metroid to rival him would be Ridley's boss fight near the end of Super Metroid. Ravenbeak sports an extremely complex moveset, effectively acting as a dark mirror to Samus, and possessing all the abilities she has, similar to the SAX. But unlike the SAX, Ravenbeak tests the player on their ability to fluidly and effectively use every resource the game arms you with and puts it to good use. He has long-range moves, mid-range moves, he can summon a black hole or a star, He can try to rush down the player with melee combat or charge right at them. He even sports wings at one point in the fight and takes to the air. I really see him as more of a complete version of what Proteus really tried to go for. On top of that, like Mother Brain, he's one of the few bosses to defeat Samus at the end, which leads to one of, if not Samus' greatest moment in all of 2D Metroid, as she goes full rage mode and absolutely annihilates Ravenbeak, giving us a satisfying cutscene fight in which we blast down the mutated Ravenbeak X. Ravenbeak is a triumph in the creation of boss fights in 2D spaces, and for now, remains the greatest final boss in Metroid. But that's all for today. You know how I leave you. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like this kind of content, and remember, be safe, be wise, and please pray for a true peace in space. Toodaloo.